Thank you for tuning in to Miscellaneous Magic this evening. Hi, I'm Gayle. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. So basically what we're going to make tonight are three old-fashioned techniques. The first one called drawn thread work, but it's not really drawn thread work. It's more of a mock drawn thread work. The next one is bundling, done with the same technique. And then the third one is fringing. So I wanted to show you some of the supplies and talk a little bit about the things that we're going to be making. First thing that we're going to use is Essex linen. So this is a cotton linen blend. This technique that we're doing tonight is a little bit like heirloom techniques. So here is a swatch that we're using. I also used Terreal Magic. Terreal Magic is an extreme starch. So you can be as light-handed or as heavy-handed with this material as you want. And I think I was probably a little too heavy-handed because you can see that it has turned our nice piece of fabric into something more like a piece of paper. So these two pieces. So the first technique we're going to do is this bundling technique. And I'm going to try to hold it up to the screen here. And that's bundling. And there are two stitches used on this stitch. One is the zigzag stitch set with certain adjustments. And then the second one is a satin stitch. And as you can see, the satin stitch is actually designed to be aligned to one side. And that's the kind of stitch that you want to use there. You don't want to use a stitch that is aligned down the center. You want to use one that's aligned down the side, and then that you can stitch it one way as you go down one side, and then another way as you go down the other side. We're going to be using some thread this evening, obviously, because it's a sewing machine. So our thread that we're using this evening is Metler Silk Finish 40. No, we're using the 50 weight thread, but 40 weight would also be really nice. But this is not quite as thick as the 40 weight thread. And for most of our applications today, this is going to be in the top of your machine and in the bobbin. For the fringing, we're going to use an additional thread. And the additional thread, there it is. I look like I have the lampshade on my head. It's a little bit too early for that, but for that, you just want any thread in the bobbin that you can see when you pull it out. So this thread is Isocord blue thread, just totally different than the pink and yellow that we're using tonight. Then, any project wouldn't be complete without the right Bernina feet. So we are going to be using, first foot that we're using is this old-fashioned foot. It's the Tailor Tack foot. See that little blade or tongue that's in there, whatever you want to call it? The Tailor Tack foot is actually designed to take your pattern tissue and put it on your fabric after you've cut it out, to mark your dart lines and other bits on a garment. So hence it's called a Tailor Tack foot, but we don't really use it for that anymore. We use it for making fancy things. So you're going to get to see that application. We need to hold our fancy things in place, and we need to be able to see exactly where we're putting the stitching when we're doing that. And that's why we're going to be using the, this is actually the Bernina foot of the month this month. It's the number 39C. We want to get a nice decorative stitch out of that. It's got a little hole through the end if you ever wanted to do raised satin stitch. However, so it's got a hole down the middle if you ever wanted to do raised satin stitching. And it also is kind of notched out on the bottom so that you can so it can go over the thick satin stitching. And that is what we're using, folks. So I'm going to get ready to sew. And no project would be complete without first changing the needle. And I found this cool little thing. Look at that. I can hold this better than the tiny little screw that came with my Bernina. This is called a screw key-do. It kind of hurts my mouth a little bit to say that, but nonetheless. So I'm going to change my needle with this so I can get a brand new needle in here. And then I am going to go away for just a second so I can grab my swatches. All right, I'm here. You can't see me, but you're going to take a look down here at what I'm doing. So I have my materials prepped. I think you can see it here if I hold it up to the camera. So I turned in the seam allowances to 1/2 inch. And I did another 1/2 inch. All right, so what I'm going to do is normally when you would sew two pieces together, you would actually sew them together and stitch down like this. But in this application, you're going to fold one edge over, fold the other edge over, and butt them up together like this. But then this is going to go under the foot. And when we line these up, it's going to go under the foot just like this. We follow that guide right down along the seam. The guide, which is the raised blade on this Tailor Tack foot, we're going to line this up just like that. Or the next step is to actually use your zigzag stitch. And I have my zigzag stitch set to 5.5 millimeters and having it be a stitch length of 0.9 millimeters long. So we don't want this to be the super tightest satin stitch that we've ever made because we want to actually see that there's thread and there's some space in between it. So we're going to line that up. Oops, my knee just hit the camera. Sorry about that. And then I'm lining this up together. And then I'm going to just hold my little tail a little bit, and then I'll move my hand in just a minute so that you can see everything. All right. Moving my threads. All right, so now I've zigzag stitched over the Tailor Tack foot, and now I'm going to pull that open and see how it's raised. That raising effect is created because there's literally a plate in there holding the thread up in the air. So now I'm tugging at it, and you can see that the thread is just hanging out there on nothing in between there. So the fabric edges are about 1/4 inch apart. All right, I'm back. Did you miss me? All right, so I press that down, and then I'm changing my foot to the 39C. I'm also going to be setting a new stitch. And I'm using stitch number 406. And I did not want to stitch 406 at the default settings on the machine. So the stitch width is at 6.2 and the stitch length is at 17.1. And I want to show you this trick I do again. Every time I use a foot that doesn't necessarily have a notch in it, I actually put the needle through the foot before I put it on and pull the thread under the foot like that. All right, so now this stitch, I'm going to stitch onto the right side of my two pieces, and I want to be catching the edge of the material, just the edge of the fold that's under those threads that we just created when I sew, and this is going to tack down my zigzag stitch that I just created here. All right, so I'm stitching at close to full speed. And I've also, another reason why I have a clear foot on here instead of an open toe foot is sometimes the open toe foot, the toe of the foot gets stuck on my loose threads that are there. And I don't want that. So I'm stopping and I'm cutting. And now I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you're using a BERNINA 770 machine like I am, when you start stitching, you will notice a little icon that shows up over top of the stitch on your machine. That's called Pattern Begin. And I'm going to hit that button. If you have a 790 or an 880, this stitch is an external button that's right above your sliding motor speed. So now I'm hitting Pattern Begin, and I'm going to go across the street. I'm lowering my presser foot here just like I stitched it the last time. And now I'm going to go down the other side of this stitch, trying to hold my threads. And once again, stitching. When the needle swings to the left, it's going just on the folded edge of the material. All right, so we've completed our first example. Ooh, there it is. And that is an example of the faux drawn thread work. And you might have some questions about what would you use this stitch for. This is actually a really nice stitch for heirloom sewing, where you're sewing maybe strips of lace together or strips of material. I'm going to switch back to my other camera right here. Hey, there I am again. And I'm going to move this little lady forward. Here she comes. She does not have wheels. That would be a fun thing to put on this girl. All right. So I'm going to just try to see. I'm going to bend her forward. Here she comes. Do you see this? The bib on this blouse is an application where you could use these designs. And what's nice about this is this can be a little bit of a fussy work, but heirloom sewing tends to be something where you sew a bunch of strips together before you do your cutting. So you sew your strips together and then you can cut. And I always pick the spot that has like the least little oopsies in it. So, but here's a real life application. All right, back to your spot, my dear. All right, so now we're going to do what we just did again. So if you felt like you didn't understand what I was doing the first time, you get another chance, because the bundled drawn thread work actually is the same technique as the drawn thread work, but with one more stitch added. So hang on. I'm going to put this one aside. Miraculously, I have two more pieces here. And just like we did last time, we're going to fold them over like that 1/2 inch seam. And by the way, you could also fold over both sides and keep making rows and rows of these together. But we're just going to do little swatches because they're going to go in the special book. So now I have two pieces. We're going to line them up together. I'm switching back to that Tailor Tack foot. Number 7, Tailor Tack foot. Getting the thread under the needle. Snuggle butting the two pieces of fabric together. Going back to my number 2 stitch, because the BERNINA machines, pretty much all of them that are electronic, have altered stitch memory. And this means that as I work on my project and toggle back and forth between all of these different stitches, any adjustments I make to them can actually be remembered. So I don't have to keep a scrap piece of paper next to me when I'm sewing, which is great because I hardly ever write anything down. All right, let's switch to the other view. Okay, still here. Awesome. All right, so I'm lining these two pieces up, and I want to make an announcement. I do have my bobbin in this time, so I remembered that part. All right, so now I'm going to stop. And I have an oop. Hang on. I didn't need that part anyway. All right. All right, that was no big deal. All right, so now I'm putting the number 39C back on, getting my thread tucked under the foot. I bet you'll never guess what stitch I'm going to be using. 406, same one that I used on the previous one. All right, so now for one moment, I'm going to iron this down. Hang on one second. I'm back again with another press down seam. So now we're going to get started by stitching just as we did before. Okay, I've come to the end of my row. I'm going to hit that pattern begin symbol that shows up directly on top of my stitching indicator on my machine. And I'm going to come down the other side and stitch this stitch again. Holding my thread when I get started. All right, see, it's just like old hat when we do things twice. All right, now I'm going to stop. And now that should look pretty much just like the other one that we made. I'm going to switch the camera view to show you something. Here I am. All right, so this is what we made earlier. This is our new version. Ooh, they're so very similar, aren't they? But the bundled thread, can you see that it looks like there's something going in between there that's holding those threads together in like little groups? That's what we're going to do next, and it's the easiest thing you will ever sew in your entire life. So go to stitch number 6. No adjustments needed for this stitch. Stitch number 6 is a triple straight stitch. So a triple straight stitch is just you're gonna stitch it with your number 39C foot directly down the middle of those bits, and it's gonna gather it. And let's go turn the camera on so you can see what I'm doing. I'd like to give a shout out to the Eclectic Gamer who has loaned us our webcams for this evening. So thank you, Eclectic Gamer. Okay, here comes our bundling. You want to be careful not to go wiggly. You want to go straight down these threads. And there's a little dot on the middle of this foot, so I can line that little red dot right in the middle of my stitching. All right, I'm done. Press my thread cutter, and now I'm going to show you what we just made. We bundled it. So there's our bundling. Woo! All right. So now, got another project to do. We have this little wonder. I think there's so many applications. You know, I've actually seen applique projects where somebody uses these to make eyelashes on doll faces and things like that. So this one requires a scrap piece of material. Now this is written in mirrored writing, but it says right on my material, this is scrap, because I'm going to keep this every time I do this exercise. Then I need another piece of my material. This time I just need the one, because we're going to use this one and then do a magic trick and it's going to go away. So this is going to go onto the machine. Like this and this. And I'm going to sew right down the middle. And I'm going to switch back to the Tailor Tack foot. And I am still using stitch number 2, but this time I'm adjusting the stitch length to be really close together, so 0.3. And then, actually, you know what? I'm going to live on the wild side here and do 0.25. Let's see what happens. The beauty of live Twitch TV. You just never know what could happen. All right. So back to the sewing view we go. Tucking my thread under my foot. Lining up the pieces together. And now we're going to stitch. Oh, wait! I forgot the most important part. Ah! This is where I have to change a bobbin. I have a bobbin in there, but I have to change it to this blue. Secondly, I forgot to tell you that you have to change your tension to a little bit looser tension for this application. So we're actually using a 1.5 tension adjustment. It's not the end of the world if you don't do that, but so changing out my bobbin for this blue bobbin. I can hear what you're saying out there already. This is going to be the ugliest swatch because you have got blue, yellow, and pink. But it's not going to be ugly. And if it is ugly, please don't comment in the chat about it. All right. Let's go back to the sewing view. All right. So we've lined our two pieces up together. This is very similar to what we've been doing, but now we have a little bit thicker stitch. So we are literally going to go for it. All right, so now I'm going to cut, pull it away, and now this requires a lot of patience and dexterity. So I think the best thing for us to do, for me to show you how to do this, is to try to do it here. Now, first, you can see a little bit of that blue underneath there, right? So the first thing that we need to do for this is we need to pull the blue thread under there. So I've got a little bit of the blue here, and I think you can see as I'm pulling it away, it's bringing our yellow thread to the center. All right. So now I have absolutely nothing holding this together. So now I just take my hand and hold my fringe, and I pull whatever the length of my fingertip is, quite frankly. Just do it very carefully. And I just did the totally wrong thing, even though I even labeled this is a scrap. I just pulled the stuff I wanted to fringe away. But I think there's irony in this, so I'm totally happy with it. But there's my fringe. I put it on the wrong side. Don't make fun of me. All right, so now I have to press it again. Don't get jealous when you hear the pulsing steam of the Laura Star iron in the background. This is a scrap. There it is. All right, so what we want to do is go back to our 39C foot. Tuck that thread under there. I have blue in the bobbin, so I need to change that out to yellow because I want the thread to match this time, since my scrap piece has now become something that's going to go in the museum. Now, put this back in. And now I'm switching back to stitch 406 with the settings that I set up when I first got started sewing. And now I'm going to line. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is that this foot has these little registration marks on it. And you can line your foot when you get started to make sure that you're starting right where your stitching is starting with those red registration lines, just like that. Also, it's important to remember to close your bobbin door after you put the bobbin in, because your bobbin sensor will tell you that there's no bobbin thread in there if you do it otherwise. All right, so we're gonna line things up and give this stitch a go. Looks like I got it stuck a little bit as I got started. I'm just gonna ease on down the streak here. Just hit my pattern end button. All right, that's pretty good. I'm going to cut. And now there's my fringed piece. So let's switch back to this view. And I have fringe. And I'm going to give it a little haircut. Cut these little bits away. Cut my little oopsie. Don't want anyone to see that. Keep my this is a scrap on there because I like something about the irony of it. However, I mean, that's pretty cute. So you could put this on cuffs, you could put this on the trim of a napkin, you could think about all the ways that you could use this. Now I'm pulling this out to show you what I do to these pieces. So ultimately, if this were an actual garment, what would you do with these extra seams that are on the back there? Sometimes I would actually have tubes that I make out of fabric that are sewn together so they're reversible, and you butt those up against each other. And then sometimes you don't want stuff to be that thick. So there's no unraveling that's going to happen under this satin stitch that's here. So I use these duckbill scissors to literally lift the edge of this material up and cut with my duckbill scissors. Ta-da! So you're going to trim your seams that way. Now let's take a minute. I just want to ask you, do you have any questions about anything that you saw or any of the products? And also, we do have everything that you see here that I showed you today is available at the store, and we will be more than happy to take an order for you and ship that to you, pack it up. Anything $50 or more is free shipping. I'm going to blink so that you don't think that you're looking at a statue right here. The stitch number 406 is actually the decorative triangular stitch that we used. The satin stitch is the zigzag stitch that we used for the bits in between on our mock drawn thread work, which is this. So satin stitch for the in-between, number 406 for our triangles. Then for that stitch that went down the center that did the bundling, that is stitch number 6, triple straight stitch. All right, so we're going to take a little pause for a moment because we're going to get ready for our quilting 4 easy ways with BERNINA domestic machines. So I want to remind you that you can watch this video on Twitch TV/BERNINA of NAperville for about 14 days. Then we will post it to our YouTube channel. So our YouTube channel, if you just go to youtube.com and search BERNINA of NAperville, you'll find us. And at YouTube, don't forget to like us, comment, and subscribe. If you want to follow more from our YouTube channel, ring the bell or click the little bell, and that will let you know when we post new videos to our channel. So for now, I'm going to sign off, but we are going to see each other again at 7.